Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. At a major summit in Montenegro, EU enlargement is back in motion, with European leaders in the city of Tivat pushing both faster accession and new forms of gradual integration for candidate countries. Ideas under discussion include observer status and partial market access, while Montenegro positions itself as the leading contender for a 2028 membership target. We're now joined by Besfort Rrecaj, International Relations Professor at the University of Pristina, to discuss it more. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Hello, Sascha. Thanks for having me.
So this summit, the EU Western Balkans summit, in its formal title, it usually takes place in Brussels. It's concluded now actually in Montenegro in the Western Balkans. Give us a sense of the success of this summit yesterday and your main takeaway.
Yes, thank you, Sascha, again. I think that the venue of holding this conference it's pretty much symbolic. And if I just may make this connection, also in a very distant time span, because the first, vision for integration of Western Balkan countries and Balkan countries in general into the European Union was given back in 2000 in Zagreb, and then in 2003 in Thessaloniki in Greece. And perhaps this is the next, the Tivat summit was the next important summit of between EU and Western Balkans, which is giving this more concrete perspective for ultimate integration of Western Balkans in the European Union. So I think this is the venue of it holding in Tivat in Montenegro is quite telling, very symbolic. However, it's not completed yet, as was mentioned by key European Union players as well as heads of states there, that it's a process that is based on merits. And that states should merit their ultimate accession into the European Union. However, on a very positive side is that we might see, or at least we have this impression that this European Union enlargement fatigue has come to an end finally, which has plagued this multilateral relationship between EU and Western Balkans, but as well as with other Eastern European countries, at least from 2007 when the last integration happened in the European Union.
Mm-hmm. Now, Besfort, you mentioned that this ultimately still needs to be a merit-based system and process. At the same time, Mr. Kosovo, the President of the European Council, was just on the screen there, has said yesterday, we must work faster and harder for both sides, for candidates and the EU institutions. With 2028 as a target for Montenegro as being the 28th member, is that realistic given what he said?
Well, I think it should be realistic, but what we see is now we see a European Union that is pulling the strings much more than they did before. Of course, it's even in a way outweighing candidate countries and Western Balkan countries, and this is probably due to what we call geopolitical acceleration. This is why EU is looking into enlargement nowadays more from the geopolitical perspective, from security concerns, and they see Western Balkan states as a vulnerable point because of regional tensions, especially Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Kosovo, which might spill over into other countries, even perhaps European Union countries. And this is why I think that seen from the European Union perspective, we might see an accelerated process, which might even translate into realistic integration of Montenegro in 2028, and possibly Albania later, that by 2030 maybe. I think it's realistic, it's doable, but we have to overcome, as it takes two for tango in this process, and we have to do our, and Western Balkan countries have to do their job, and it is doable, I think. Having under consideration that we have the European Union has put lots of projects to help Western Balkan countries to achieve those European standards. For example, one of the most important development is the growth plan, where the European Union has put close to 10 billions of euros available for the Western Balkan states to accelerate the reform process.
All right, so various things in motion. I'm just curious also, I mean, you mentioned earlier that there's now more of an involved European Union in this region because of geopolitical tensions with Russia, with China also vying in that area. But nevertheless, I want to ask you about this proposal, this idea of some calling it membership light model. This is being pushed by Germany and France. This idea of giving partial single market access, also kind of this half in, half out. What do you make of that? I mean, is this ultimately going to be an incentive, or is this going to, let's say, become a sort of like frozen half membership?
Well, there are many options circulating nowadays. I mean, we also saw an earlier letter by Albania's Prime Minister Edi Rama and Serbian Prime Minister Vučić even lobbying for some sort of membership without veto right. And we still don't know what does it mean exactly, but very interesting idea. On the other hand, we have this some sort of reverse membership ideas, still not clear what does that entail, and also in a more concrete terms, and that is coming from the European Union officials, some sort of, access, partial access, mainly to internal market, as you mentioned it. It means that ultimately the Western Balkan states are not outside the door. Somehow they are inside the house, but still maybe only one leg there, and or most of the body outside, maybe just dragging in the first leg there. But we still are not clear what does that exactly and concretely entails, and this would have to be concretized in the coming, let's say, not days, weeks, not months, because the people of Balkans need to know what are they being offered, because on the one side this may be an incentive, but on the other side this may prolong the process. It might be seen just giving some partial or just half of the carrot there, but on the other hand, the people of the Western Balkan states are looking for a full membership to the European Union with full rights and voting powers, and being just an ordinary member as other member states there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also I think someone cautioning against a sort of light membership or something that isn't full membership is Ukraine. I mean, they've already said and stated they think this is a danger to their candidate status, that they say it risks maybe this two-tier membership. So does this have the potential, if something lighter goes ahead as Western Balkans, does that set a precedent here? How is that being considered, do you think?
Well, in its nature, it is some sort of precedent, because this has never happened before. We have seen a one-step process, which is accession to the European Union. Of course, we have this fulfillment of criteria, as always, the so-called Copenhagen criteria for membership into the European Union. However, now we see this integration as more as a process, which I think it's not still clear how this will unfold in the future, and what kind of impact it will have in this bilateral relationship. And in the end, if we are seeing it as a geopolitical and security concern, posture of European Union towards Western Balkans and Eastern European states. What does it mean if, let's say, Russia reaches an agreement with Ukraine, in a way avoiding or how should I put these security concerns of what about if China is not anymore seen as a threat in the region? What does it mean for the process in general after that? So there are many questions that needs to be answered. Perhaps also good questions for research, for academia and scholars that might help us and European leaders, decision makers, to make this process more certain.
Mm-hmm. And also, I want to get your sense. I mean, you're in Pristina at the moment, so tell us about this upcoming election there. How much this will be debated, and how much that will also be continued and involved with the EU's process, NATO membership. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, thank you for that. Interesting question. I could not help but notice that your correspondent from Tivat did not mention, I think, at all Kosovo there. And perhaps he had a reason there, but Kosovo was present there in Tivat. However, Kosovo remains the only country that has not received candidate status towards the European Union. And of course, Kosovo has applied for the candidate status, but EU has not responded yet. This leaves Bosnia and Herzegovina, the last candidate status that was awarded this status back in 2022. Kosovo has multifold issues. This is that are making a very complex EU-Kosovo relationship. First and foremost, we have this 5 EU member states still do not recognize Kosovo as an independent state, and then we have this issue with Serbia, but also we have this internal issues and elections that now I want to go back to elections that you have mentioned. These are the third elections in a year, or a little bit more than a year, that are being held and organized in Kosovo due to internal struggles, due to political parties not being able to, not being in earlier elections, in the first times, not being able to reach an agreement for a government, and then not being able to reach an agreement for the president. And this does not send a good signal to the EU, probably. This is going to prolong the process, I believe, and we have to overcome this. Kosovo has to overcome this election cycle and to think more for the better of the people in general, and to respond to requests from the European Union and straighten this path towards European Union integration.
All right, so many different threads there in the Western Balkans. Look, thanks so much for giving us all the latest. Much appreciated. That was our guest here, Besfort Rrecaj, International Relations Professor. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching, and do stay with us right here on TVP World for more. Goodbye.